Welcome. My name's Pepe Martinez and I'm a London Blue Badge tourist guide, and I'm one of 600 Blue Badge guides who are members of the Association of Professional Tour Guides, and we manage the Guide London website and these Guide London broadcasts. Now, when we went into lockdown 2 months, like many of you, it got a bit quiet around here and there was not many tourists coming in for us to use our lovely badges, and so we thought, how can we stay connected to the outside world? And so we decided to start these live broadcasts so we can bring London to you. And so every Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 4 o'clock, we go live and we showcase different parts of London culture, some of its most famous buildings and some of its most famous people. Now, if this is your first time joining us, wherever you are in the world, welcome. Please make sure that you leave a comment and let us know where you're joining us from. And also, if you have any questions as the broadcast goes on, please also feel to leave your questions there and we'll try and highlight some of them at the end. Also, we'd really appreciate it if you would share these broadcasts with your friends. We are going out live on Facebook, on Twitter, and also YouTube as well, and you'll find the videos there later on. And incredibly, since we started this project, nearly 100,000 people have watched us, which is quite incredible, and so we thank you for joining. Now, who or what are we going to be focusing on today? Well, today we're going to go right to the top of the tree. We're going to talk about one of the titans of English literature, arguably the greatest writer in the English language, William Shakespeare. Now, William Shakespeare was born in a beautiful village outside of London called Stratford upon Avon, and it is just a 2-hour drive from Stratford. And so hopefully we're going to whet your appetite just a little bit today so that when lockdown ends, perhaps Stratford will be at the top of your list. We're also going to look at some of the famous places that William Shakespeare was associated with in London, including the famous Globe Theatre. Now, Ben Jonson, a contemporary writer of William Shakespeare, referred to Shakespeare as a man for now and all time. So I hope I've whetted your appetite. What I'm going to do is introduce you to my esteemed colleague, Rick, who's going to be telling us just a little bit about William Shakespeare and his life. Well, good morning, Rick. How are you?
Good afternoon. You said good morning, but good morning to some people, I suppose, in the world, isn't it? Yeah. Good afternoon, Pepe.
So you're going to be telling us all about William Shakespeare. How long have you qualified as a Blue Badge guide, and what did you do in your old life?
I qualified in 2018, so 2 years ago, and I was previously a writer about music, journalist, music critic for the Evening Standard, and other publications.
Fantastic.
And so my life has been involved with the arts, and I came to Shakespeare through the music, essentially. I'm holding here my lute, which is to William Shakespeare what the brass band is to Sousa, say, the American band leader. I mean, they are intimates.
Fantastic. Well, Rick, over to you. Let's hear all about William Shakespeare. I'll see you in a bit.
Thank you so much. I'll let you, and good afternoon, everybody else who's here. This is my lute. I don't know how well it picks up, but this is the sort of atmosphere that you would have as a play begins in William Shakespeare's time at the Globe Theatre, which was round like a globe, hence the name. People stood in the daylight in the centre, the stage stretched out into the crowd, and on the stage a lute player would be intoning some sad but seductive chords. If music be the food of excess of it, that surfeiting the appetite may sicken and so die, some of the most famous lines in Shakespeare in all of English literature. And that opens the play Twelfth Night, which was one of the 13 comedies of William Shakespeare. I'll leave the lute on my lap for now. 13 comedies, 13 tragedies, 10 history plays, a very symmetrical canon creativity of William Shakespeare. He knew what he was doing. Twelfth Night was performed for the first time in 1602 at a venue in London, which we'll see. It wasn't published, however, until 1623, 7 years after William Shakespeare died. I'm going to show you now a bust, if you'd like to show the first slide, please, Pepe. Now, there is William Shakespeare, and beside it, his dates, 1564 to 1616. 7 years after he died, the words, "If music be the food of love," in the play Twelfth Night were published for the first time. In a book, the collected works of William Shakespeare, put together by two of his friends, the last remaining actors. And I'm coming on to that. Let me just tell you a little bit about this bust here. This is what you see if you go to visit William Shakespeare's grave in his hometown of Stratford upon Avon, which is, it may be 2 hours in a coach today, but in Shakespeare's time, it was 2 days, stagecoach journey away from London to the northwest. Oxford was the overnight stopping point. And William Shakespeare always stayed at the same place in Oxford when he did his journey. He commuted. He was an early commuter from his hometown into London. He would make the journey about 4 times a year, probably. His wife and children stayed back at home in Stratford upon Avon. His wife was Anne Hathaway, a fair bit older than he was, 6 years older, and it was she who commissioned this statue in 1623, 7 years after he died. Or it took that long for the business to get done. The sculptor of the statue of the bust worked down in London and knew Shakespeare on the theatrical circuit down there. So the likeness is, in all probability, pretty close to what Shakespeare looked like, although it's not a particularly accomplished piece of sculpture by anyone. It's rather a sort of, different writers have been rude about it over the years, this bust. Pevsner, Sir Nicholas Pevsner described it as a self-satisfied schoolmaster. Somebody else described him as a pork butcher. You can see he's holding a quill there. Reminds me of a joke that Sam Goldwyn, the American filmmaker, made about William Shakespeare when he came to the works of William Shakespeare for the first time. He said, "Amazing, and all done with a feather." Good old Sam Goldwyn. And it was all done with a feather. He didn't use anything else, of course. Now, his 36 plays in the first folio, the first edition, that's what I'm going to talk to you about, as well as the entire life of William Shakespeare. There he is up in his hometown, aloft, and he married to Anne Hathaway. Now, the next slide, please, Pepe. This is what you'd see if you go up to Stratford, to Shakespeare's birthplace, unchanged. Look at that. In 500 years, that's Anne Hathaway's cottage. That's where William went to court his older bride. She was 26, he was 19. They had to marry in a hurry. The daughter was already on the way, his elder daughter, Susanna. Anyway, that's thatched cottage. It's not a film set, what you're looking at. That is the real thing. And it makes a fantastic day out to go up to Stratford just to look among the Shakespeare relics there. And there are a few of them. There's where he went to school. There's his birthplace. And Anne Hathaway's cottage. The Hathaway family was conscious of their relationship with Shakespeare from the very beginning. And they always maintained connections with the Shakespeare myth, because not long after he died, but also significantly after he died, a sort of trail developed to his birthplace. Anyway, let's now go to London from Stratford upon Avon, the 2-day stagecoach ride via Oxford. And let's plonk ourselves now, please, Pepe, next slide, in London. This is the very centre of the City of London. And by the city, with a capital C, I mean the ancient part, the bit that was London when Shakespeare was alive, which was much smaller, much smaller than it is today. The city of 8.8 million people today was in Shakespeare's time maybe 200,000, that sort of thing. And the area it occupied was about a square mile. And this pretty little garden, a bit bare of leaves in this picture, but it's a beautiful place, secluded and quiet, right in the heart of the city. In fact, these types of gardens exist all over the city, this central part, which otherwise is banks and finance houses and insurance companies. But you get amongst them these wonderfully picturesque gardens. And this one is dedicated to Shakespeare. It's in, it's just inside the old city wall. The tall building that you see behind the trees is called Albans Gate. There would have been a gate there leading out of the city once, and that building straddles the road. It's as if it was built to be that by Terry Farrell, one of the leading architects today. But you pass underneath it as if it were a Roman arched ancient bridge. So this garden is just inside, and it was once a churchyard. The church was destroyed in the Second World War bombs, the Blitz, and the church was called St Mary Aldermanbury. This street is called Aldermanbury. Where the man is walking, he is in Aldermanbury. He's about to turn right into Love Lane. Love Lane. Well, all streets in London were named for what you could get in them. So Bread Street, Milk Street, Honey Street, you know where to go to get those things. Love Lane, well, I leave you to guess the rest. The church stood here. The church was destroyed in the war, turned to rubble. They didn't rebuild it. Instead, the American Westminster College at Fulton, Missouri, said they would buy it, the rubble, and they would take it back to America and rebuild it at Westminster College. There it is. That's the church. That's the real thing, which originally Christopher Wren had built in the 1670s. Turns to rubble and then beautifully rebuilt. I mean, it may well look better there in Fulton, Missouri than it did when it stood in London, which made it probably rather dirty. Here against the blue sky, fantastic. You can just see a little statue in front of it. That is Winston Churchill. And he is there, the great wartime leader of Britain, Prime Minister. He is there because it was in Fulton, Missouri, at Westminster College in 1946 that he made a speech about the future of Europe and described the coming down of the Iron Curtain from Stettin on the Baltic Sea down to Trieste on the Adriatic. An Iron Curtain has descended, as he might have said. And that phrase passed into common parlance, and Fulton, Missouri, Westminster College has retained the link. And to make the link even more permanent, they brought here a real church from London. Let's go on a slide. We now go back to the garden in London, and in the centre of the garden, a memorial to William Shakespeare. Beneath the bust of Shakespeare, an open book And that book is the first folio. That is the first time all the plays were collected together and published as one lot. 18 of the 36 plays had been published before, separately, and many of them without even the author's name, with no mention of William Shakespeare. It would just say, The History of King Henry V, and leave it at that, for instance. But now, for the first time, they're in print all together as one lot. In fact, what it really is a record of the plays which the Chamberlain's men performed. And that was the acting troupe which William Shakespeare was an actor in. He was an actor. He performed. Didn't hold the star parts, but he was an actor in the company. That was his profession. And these are the plays that were performed. The 10 history plays, they give the history of England in one continuous stretch from Richard II through to Henry VIII. There's nothing missed out. King John is slightly separate. He comes right at the beginning. And King John is the only one of the history plays that wasn't published before Shakespeare died. All the other history plays, they were already in print, but as I said, not often without his name on. Now, that makes this book then a very significant achievement. And it's too faint, I think, to see, but the dedication, the words there are honour John Hemming and Henry Condell. There are the two names written. These were the last two, I've already mentioned it, but the last two remaining actors of the company. They alone remembered what the company had been like. And they realized in the 1620s that if they didn't do something about it, the entire history would be lost, the entire experience, the story of the Chamberlain's men. Yes, some of the individual plays existed, but not the entire canon, the complete works, and therefore the record of what these people had achieved. Because William Shakespeare worked as part of a collective. He was an actor in a company and differs in that respect from other playwrights of the time, like Ben Jonson or Sam Kidd. They worked individually and presented a finished play to a company. William Shakespeare worked among the actors. So Hemming and Condell are the last two. They performed themselves. They were actors. They played Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. They were associated together too. They lived in this area of London, as did William Shakespeare. They were the church wardens of the church, which is now in Fulton, Missouri. And that's why this monument is in this garden now, because it was the churchyard where Hemming and Condell were the leading parishioners. And you get details of their lives here. John Hemming had a family of 14 children. He also came from Stratford upon Avon. He knew William Shakespeare when they were young. They're born around the same time. The children ran a grocery shop, or he would have had help, because as an actor, he was called across the river, but he had this grocery business too in Aldermanbury. Condell had a secondary business he had property, so he was collecting rents, and that gave him another income to go with his acting. So these are the two men. They realized Richard Burbage, the leading tragic actor of the company, played King Lear and Othello and Macbeth and Hamlet. He died in 1619, and it was at that point that they realized, that something must be done. So let's now go from the garden in Shakespeare to the south side. And before we do, I'll show you, this is a first folio here now. That's the copy. That's what these two men produced. 700 copies were printed, beautifully bound in leather, gold lettering, and exquisite printing inside with all these wonderfully geometric designs throughout. Beautiful book. About 250 of them now exist. And of those 250, 90% of them are in one place, and that is the Folger Library in Washington, D.C. Henry Folger in the 19th century made it his life's ambition to collect and bid for at auctions as many copies of the first folio he could. And he died in the 1930s. His work continues as the Folger Library now. In many ways, the Americans have treasured William Shakespeare even more than the Brits. It was, after all, the language that went out with the Mayflower, with the founding fathers in 1620, the language of William Shakespeare, which in itself was enjoying a great flowering. You have to realize that 100 years before William Shakespeare, the language of English was the language of the peasant classes. The monarchy spoke in French, the church spoke in Latin. By Shakespeare's time, both of those had switched. The monarchy spoke now in English and the church in English, and a great social revolution had taken place. It's not surprising that William Shakespeare was only one of dozens of poets who operated at the time. I'm conscious a little bit of the time getting on, but let's go on now. You see all that London was in Shakespeare's time. On the north side of the river, we're looking towards the north from this vantage point. You see Old London Bridge there, which for 1500 years was the only bridge across the River Thames. Otherwise, you crossed by ferry, and you see all the little boats there. So that collection of spires, that's London as Shakespeare knew it. St. Paul's Cathedral there. All of this would be destroyed 150 years after Shakespeare's time in a great conflagration, the 1666 fire. But in Shakespeare's time, that's how it looked. The theatre district was on the south side. This wasn't even London at all. This was called Borough, or Southwark sometimes, the South Walk, the South Bank. You see the church in the foreground, that is, it's now Southwark Cathedral, but in Shakespeare's time it was St. Saviour's Church. Just a little towards the left-hand side, you see two flags. The larger of the flags is on the Globe Theatre, that is the Globe there. So this would have been Shakespeare's daily route to work. He lived near St. Paul's Cathedral on the north side, came across the river to the Globe where they rehearsed and performed. Now, if we go to the next picture, this is Temple Hall. I mentioned it earlier on. This is one of only two venues surviving in London where Shakespeare's works were performed. We know this was the premiere of Twelfth Night, took place in Temple Hall, Middle Temple Hall it's called, on 1602, in the presence of Queen Elizabeth. She would never have gone to the rather seedy theatre district, the red light district. So the play went to her and met at a halfway house, this magnificent hall here. You see the hammer beam roof up there. This place was a great venue then, and it is now. Let's go on one further, Pepe. This is the Globe Theatre, but reconstructed. This was a project by the American actor Sam Wanamaker, who came to London first in the 1950s as a student and looked around for mementos. He was an actor, budding actor. Where was William Shakespeare to be represented? He couldn't find anything. He said, hey, even San Diego's got a Globe Theatre. And it has. There's a famous Shakespeare event, a festival at San Diego. But anyway, it became then his life's ambition to give London a Globe Theatre. He started in the 1980s. He was scoffed at by the press, I remember, because I went to interview him. I wasn't one of the scoffers. I thought, well, as a result of the interview, we became quite good friends. And this became his great project, which he didn't live to see the end of. He died like Moses just before the completion of the project in the 1990s. And then it was his daughter, Zoe Wanamaker, who's become a well-known comedy actress in this company, who oversaw the final dates. But it sits on the river, on the bank of the River Thames, more or less in the same place that William Shakespeare's own Globe Theatre did. And it is an exact replica. The plugs that hold those beams together are wooden plugs. It has a thatched roof. Imagine trying to get that through the planning permission people in 1990s. Thatched roof in the middle of London, you're having a laugh, mate, they would have said. But anyway, he got it done, and it's a tribute to him and to, well, it's a great addition to the London theatre scene too, because it's been a huge success. Where all the theatre critics thought it would be a disaster, it was not at all. Anyway, let's continue one more slide now. This is Southwark Cathedral, which in Shakespeare's time was called St Saviour's, and it sits right in the middle of Borough Market. You see these stalls here, and this makes a wonderful day out. You can spend all day at the market browsing among these wonderful stalls, and go into the cathedral when you feel tired, and have a sit down, rest your feet. Sit by the Sam Wanamaker Shakespeare window, which is in there, dedicated by his friends. And imagine the actors that used to come there. Many of the names of the first of the actors that were in the company are in the cathedral records. A joke was made when Richard Burbage, the leading tragedian, died. The scribe in the register of deaths, the scribe at the cathedral wrote, "Exit Burbage," which is lovely. It's a joke that's lasted 400 years. Let's go one more slide, please. This is the last. Oh, John Harvard. I've put him here because I said that books went out to the ships. The Mayflower went out to the USA from 1620, and from that date, a constant stream of vessels made its way with passengers on one-way tickets to the New World, and John Harvard is one of them. And he was baptized in Southwark Cathedral, St Saviour's Church in Shakespeare's day, 1607. He inherited a public house from his parents, and he sold the pub and bought a library worth of books with it, including a first folio. And when he went out to the US, the New World, the library became the foundation of Harvard University. He went out in 1637 and he died the following year, but his legacy lived on in the books, and the university was founded in his name. So he's a Southwark connection. You will see there is a Harvard chapel in the cathedral too. And then the next slide brings us right up to date now. This statue here is the most recent addition to Shakespeare statuary in London. And there's not all that much, actually, as Sam Wanamaker discovered. But this is to stand in Southwark Cathedral's yard. The man on the left is the Dean of Southwark, Andrew Nunn. He's going to welcome the statue in and bless it, probably. That's what priests do. And the man on the right is the billionaire who has commissioned this work. Not that it cost £1 billion, but he has £1 billion. Nick Roditi is his name. He's a financier and good friend of George Soros, who's another name in the world of finance, which is a big part of London, of course, the financial markets. And they are conscious of the need to preserve the legacy of Shakespeare, the business community. I'm drifting, and so I'm going to conclude there with that statue. It was due to be unveiled this year on Shakespeare's birthday, alongside a performance that I would have given with a comedian. We've done it every year for the last 20, in honour of William Shakespeare. And so because that never took place, I'm telling you now about the new statue and given this little talk in replacement for what I would have said. But there you are. Pepe?
Thank you very much, Rick. I certainly hope that whetted your appetite, ladies and gentlemen. If you plan on making a visit to London or even Stratford upon Avon in the future. Now, I know we normally have quite a lot of younger viewers watching, Rick. So with your permission, I hope you don't mind. I'd just like to show our younger viewers a little piece of street art that you might see if you go and visit the Globe Theatre. Now, this incredible work was done by an Australian street artist called Jimmy C. He got permission from Network Rail to create this piece, and to raise money for charity, the Globe Theatre even allowed him to sell a limited edition print in their bookshop. Now, I just wanted to quickly mention the Globe. I hope you don't mind, Rick, because the Globe Theatre announced yesterday they are in serious financial trouble. So please do what you can to support them. I'm putting up the web address of Shakespeare's Globe, and they are raising funds as we speak to hopefully continue as a going entity when we come out of lockdown. So do what you can. Also, again, with Rick's permission, Rick knows that I'm a huge movie buff. And so, again, younger viewers, families, got kids, if you're like me, and you hated Brussels sprouts and Shakespeare when you were a kid, you know, what's a good way in to get young people, I think, into movies? Well, or into Shakespeare, I should say. Well, and now, Rick, I know you're a particular fan of this film.
Yes, Pepe, yeah. Leonardo DiCaprio. And it's a wonderful film because the script is entirely Shakespeare's. It's all the Shakespearean language, and yet the atmosphere is so contemporary.
So if you haven't seen this film, ladies and gentlemen, it was directed by the Australian director Baz Luhrmann, and it is just a phenomenal, I think, a phenomenal way to kind of get to grips with the language of Shakespeare, but as Rick said, in a modern and contemporary setting. And I'd just like to mention one more film, again, with Rick's permission. I'm very excited. Now, this is an old film poster for the original film version of West Side Story, arguably one of the greatest musicals ever written. And for those of you that don't know, it was based on one of Shakespeare's most famous plays, Romeo and Juliet. But in case you don't know this, next year it has been refilmed in a modern contemporary setting with actors that are playing the ethnicities of their characters, and it's directed by Steven Spielberg, one of the great Hollywood film directors. So I don't know about you, Rick, but I'm really looking forward to seeing that when it comes out in movie theaters next year.
I want to be in America.
Thank you very much, Rick. That's lovely. Now, we've got lots of people from around the world. Just very quickly, we've got Mark King. He's in sunny Finchley. So a quick shout out to Mark today. We've got Valeria from Argentina. We've got Bodley from Norway. We've got Andy from Barcelona. I mean, incredible, amazing. Oh, we've got Daniela looking in from Brazil. We've got Ronnie from Catford. Let's sing it up for Catford. I think that's where you're from, isn't it?
Yeah, and in fact, that's from my house.
Oh, there we go. Nice to know that we've got an audience today. That's fantastic. Oh, we've got somebody from Philip from Bulgaria. So great to see you guys watching. We've got Margarita from Brighton. And we've also got a couple of points people have made as well. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Bodley, for your comment. I certainly hope the Globe Theatre will continue. In 1996, I bought a brick of the Globe. Oh, fantastic, to raise money. So that was one of the fundraising projects they had at the very beginning. We've also got just a couple of other comments, maybe. Oh, there's a lovely comment from Sarah. Andre Holland, who is starring in the Eddie on Netflix and was in Moonlight, studied in London with FSU when the Globe first opened. What a lovely story. Thank you for that, Sarah. Now, thank you, Rick. That was a fantastic presentation. If you want to find Rick, you can look him up on the Guide London website. So there is his name on the screen as we speak. I'm just going to also give you a little taste of the Guide London website as well. So guidelondon.org, and you can scroll down. You can search the website by guide name. You can search by popular tours. The Shakespeare is one of the most popular tours available on our website. And also you can search by language as well, because don't forget that we guide in more than 35 different languages. So thank you all for listening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to Rick for being our Shakespeare expert today. Stay safe and well. Please don't forget to share this broadcast with your friends, and we'll see you again on Friday for another live broadcast. And thank you for listening. Bye-bye.